medicine, public health, clinical psychology, criminal justice. And in fact, one of these was so embarrassingly like what I was going to say, that I knew I had to cite it because people, if they found it, would accuse me of plagiarism. But I assure you, I had this in my head before I saw that it was in public health. So, National Cancer Institute, advertising a cyber seminar in last year, says, the translational gap between research and practice has long been discussed, often as a one-way street. Get practitioners to recognize and utilize the research that's being conducted. These are my italics. While important, equally important is the reverse, integrating practice-based research evidence and context into the research being conducted. We need a bridge between the two, not a pipeline. This is, and I should say, the previous one was for colorectal oncologists, and the pipeline that they're talking about is the pipeline. Moving on to, I wanted to get that into my paper, but there were page limits. Keep this straight. Okay, this is in public health. If we want more evidence-based practice, we need more practice-based evidence. The importance of practitioners and policymakers in shaping research questions. Practitioners and their organizations represent structural links and barriers to addressing the important determinants at each level: engagement. And I can tell you that when I think about my work, I think about it as a form of practice. And engagement is a very important part of that. And engagement, and yesterday when there was discussion about agencies wanting only positive findings, very, very early in the engagement process, I'm talking with practitioners, I'm talking with administrators about this as a discovery process. And the high probability that if we're doing the research right, there are going to be surprises. And some of those surprises are going to be positive, and some might not be. And unless they're willing to contract with me in that regard, then we don't move forward. Clinical psychology. This was from a recent online publication. Instead of bemoaning the differences between researchers and practitioners, both parties should take concrete steps to make their work more accessible to each other. In this article, Alan Kasdan was the president of the American Psychological Association, and the person who wrote this article recommends the Kasdan way of mending the split. And what Kasdan was talking about is contextualizing practice through qualitative research, not just relying on RCTs, giving more research attention to treatment moderators, and finally, and I was happy to see this, systematically analyzing the practice experience of clinicians, which comes closest to what I call clinical data mining. So what actually got me here was a paper that I wrote and published in Social Work. I can't remember the title of it, but it had something to do with reconciling evidence-based practice and evidence-informed practice through practice-based research. And that paper was written because I was struck by the anti-practitioner rhetoric that existed in the journal Research on Social Work Practice. I was sort of reading, most of my practitioner colleagues never read that journal. I read it all the time. I think it has made an enormous contribution in many ways, the development of rapid assessment instruments, RCTs, meta-analyses, and so on. But when you read reviews, when you read stuff about applications of findings, a lot of the rhetoric about practitioners is negative. So I think that's a real problem. And I think that's one of the major obstacles to practitioners and researchers working collaboratively. Swear is a swear word. those of us in research, I mean, the first conference we think about going to is SWORR, the Society for Social Work Research. But I've been surprised, I haven't been surprised that practitioners never, at least the ones I talk with, and believe me, I don't set them up for this, but they don't even think about attending. And there are many practice researchers who have a very negative attitude about the organization because their work has been rejected over and over again. I happen to have a perfect record of rejection from that conference, and I started to take pride in it. So there's a problem there. And finally, the journal Research on Social Work Practice, I always thought, well, you know, if that journal had been called Research in Social Work Practice, and the kinds of papers that Bruce was talking about yesterday that should be encouraged, co-authoring with practitioners, quasi-experimental and so on, if they could get in, then I think it would be a very different journal indeed. So, to redirect the traffic flow, I'm going to make some outrageous suggestions, and but I think they're worth considering, actually. One is to go off the gold standard and to adopt the wheel of evidence, which strategically employs mixed methods and exercises methodological humility. So, replace the hierarchy of evidence that we all know about with a circle, a pluralist wheel of evidence, in which we recognize the strengths and limits of every research methodology and what they can contribute to each other. I'm working with a guy in Hong Kong, just finished his dissertation, began with a CDM study that goes into an RCT. Others that begin with RCTs that move into some qualitative research. All of that is possible, all of that is important. We need to develop that kind of flexibility. A better model of collaboration. One of the things my colleague S.J. Dodd and I, in a new book that we did on practice-based research, took a model that Mary McKay developed, which was a one-way sort of stage model of practitioner-researcher collaboration in which all the ideas were coming from the researcher. And what we did was just to modify that slightly so that at every step in the research process, the ideas could be initiated by the practitioner. Now, this doesn't preclude understanding that practitioners don't have all the skills that researchers have, but it also means that researchers don't have all the skills that practitioners have. And if we're going to do this collaboratively, it's got to go both ways. Clinical data mining, practice-based research, practitioner researchers systematically retrieve, codify, and analyze qualitative and quantitative data for practice and policy implications. These are never RCTs. The best you can get is using an RCT analog. I've shown how that can be done. One of the exciting things about, well, the one on the left is the first one was a collection of CDM studies in hospital settings. The one in the middle is a how-to. The one on the end is one that I'm very excited about. It's the most recent one that involves not just social workers, but allied health professionals, speech pathologists, physical therapists, occupational therapists, all doing clinical data mining studies, some in multidisciplinary teams, some in single-disciplinary teams. Recommendations, okay. First of all, yesterday we talked about the distinction between evidence-informed practice, evidence-based practice. I think this could be a wonderful bridging concept if it was all-encompassing, if it encompassed all kinds of research methods, rather than if it was appropriated, and I'm thinking in some respects, I'm seeing them being used interchangeably. It's not, for me, it's not a synonym for EBP. Pre-doctoral education, teach research in ways that don't trash practitioners. I have seen so many adjuncts, so many full-time research instructors teaching at the expense of practitioners as a way of making their own position somehow more legitimate. I think that's very destructive. Doctoral education, again, stop trashing practitioners, seek Ph.D. students with a background in practice, treat practice wisdom as hypotheses to be tested, as well as sources of moderators and mediators, and ultimately view CDM by itself and in combination with other methodologies as legitimate dissertation options. Possible changes for SWR, make efforts to attract practitioners to SWR meetings, special interest groups, encourage collaborative presentations with practitioners, provide CDM dissertation rewards, broaden the scope of the Aaron Rosen Award. I mean, you know, I can't tell you the number of times that I've heard people who received that award, which is a wonderful award, talk about how they haven't worked with practitioners, as though this is a point of honor. I think that's awesome. Make RSWP more methodologically pluralist and give more attention to practice context, treatment moderators, I know, Patrick, and build research bridges between research and practice with two-way traffic, where practitioners as well as researchers can drive. Gotta let me get these in. We're not talking about gold standard bridges. We're not talking about separate tracks. I'm from New York. The Triborough Bridge is my metaphor. It connects 3 locations, practice, research, and pedagogy. Traffic runs in all directions. It's not elegant, but it does the job. Thank you very much.
Wow, that's very inspiring. Our next person to respond or discuss